We always ask the question, what makes a hero? And now more importantly, what makes a monster? Usually we think of monsters as the things hiding under the bed or aliens invading from the sky. But sometimes the monster is the man sitting at the head of a boardroom table. Sometimes he's the father of your best friend smiling at you when he plots your destruction. Today, we're diving into the tragic, brilliant, and terrifying history of the man who single-handedly ended the innocence of the Silver Age. We're looking at Norman Osborn and his journey from Green Goblin, the maniac, to the one thing you'd never expect. Welcome back to Marvel Echoes Resonance. I'm your host, Will, and if you've been listening for a while, you know we talk a lot about echoes, how the origin ripples through time and to define a character's legacy. Well, today we're talking about a character whose echo is more like a scream that never stops laughing. We're talking about the Green God, Iron Patriot, the Red Death, Norman Osborn. Now, growing up in the 90s, my first real exposure to this guy was in the Spider-Man the Animated Series, just like the X-Men Animated Series. You remember the one Neil Rawls doing that high-pitched maniac voice in the purple and green suit that looked like it walked out of a nightmare? It was terrifying for kids. But as I got older, it actually dug into the comics. I realized their cartoon was just scratching the surface. The Green Goblin isn't a guy in a Halloween costume throwing pumpkins. He is the result of a generational trauma weaponized into pure, unadulterated malice. If we look at that origin spark, most people think it starts with the explosion in the lab. You know, the drill, the green smoke, bubbling breaker, boom, instant supervillain. It's a classic Stan Lee and Steve Ditko setup. But if we really dig into the lore, the real origin starts years earlier in a dark, empty house. Norman's father, Emerson Osborn, was a failed inventor and a mean drunk. He lost the family fortune and really took it out on his son. He used to lock up Norman in dark rooms for hours, taunting him, teaching him that the world is divided into predators and prey. And Norman, terrified of that darkness, made a choice. He decided that the only way to survive the dark was to become the monster hiding in it. That is key. Norman was broken long before the Goblin formula touched his lips. In fact, recent retcons, and we love a good retcon, have revealed that Norman actually tested an early version of the serum on an employee named Nels Van Adder. Van Adder turned into this hulking red-skinned beast called the Proto-Goblin. Norman saw this happen, he saw the monster he created, and he didn't stop it. He just thought, I can refine this. This is the ego of Norman Osborn. He looked at a demon and thought he could put a saddle on it. So when the famous explosion finally happened in Amazing Spider-Man number 40, the chemicals didn't create a new personality. They just unlocked the door. The Goblin persona was the id, the rage, the confidence that Norman had bottled up. Repressed businessmen could never show that in public. When he first debuted, he was riding a mechanical broomstick, for a lack of better terms. It was 1964. Things were weird. Maybe just trying to beat the Wicked Witch of the West for Patton. But very quickly, he upgraded to the backglider, and the tone shifted from campy to deadly. We talked back in episode 3 how Spider-Man is defined by responsibility. Well, the Green Goblin is the antithesis of that. He is entitlement. He is the belief that because he has power, he is owed everything. The moment that changed everything, not just for Osborn, but for comics in general, was the unmasking. Before Norman, villains were anonymous criminals. You punched them, they went to jail, but Norman figured out Peter was Spider-Man. And then he revealed he was the father of Peter's college roommate, Harry Osborn. Think about that dynamic. As a father myself, the idea of your son's best friend's dad secretly trying to kill you is a level of intimacy that makes your skin crawl. It moved the battlefield from being a bank vault to a living room. And then Peter couldn't just punch the bad guy, because punching the bad guy meant destroying his best friend's family. And that escalation leads us to the most resonant arc in history, the night Gwen Stacy died, back in 1973. I cannot stress this enough. Before this comic, the bad guys didn't win. The hero always saved the girl. Lois Lane always fell and Superman always caught her. But Norman took Gwen to the top of the George Washington Bridge. And no, it wasn't the Brooklyn Bridge, despite what the art looked like. And he threw her off. When Spidey's web caught her, snap. That sound effect ended the Silver Age. Norman didn't kill her with a laser or a bomb. He killed her using Peter's own love and the laws of physics against him. It broke the rules. It proved that in the Marvel Universe, being a hero wasn't enough. And even though Norman died at the end of the story, impaled by his own glider in a moment of, well, poetic justice, the damage was done. He had proven that heroes can fail. For over 20 years, Norman was dead in the comics, but his Echo kept hurting people. His son Harry took on the mask and overdosed on the formula. The Hobgoblin franchise started up using Norman's gear. The Clone Saga happened. Turned out Norman had survived the glider impalement thanks to his healing factor, hiding in Europe, pulling strings like a puppet master. When he finally returned in the late 90s, the writers realized something crucial. You can't just have him throwing pumpkin bombs at Spider-Man forever. That gets old. To keep him relevant, he had to evolve. So, how did he evolve and went from Spider-Man's villain to an Avengers-level threat? And then finally, to one thing nobody ever saw coming. Because this is where the character study gets fascinating. Imagine if the worst, most manipulative person you knew suddenly became the most popular man in America. That's essentially what happened in the 2008 run of Secret Invasion. The Earth was being invaded by shape-shifting Skrulls. The heroes were scattered, and Tony Stark's tech had failed. In the chaos, Norman Osborn, who was leading a team of reformed villains called the Thunderbolts, took the kill shot on the Skrull Queen. He did it on live TV, and the world loved him for it. This kicked off the Dark Reign era. This part hits hard because of how cynically Norman manipulated patriotism. He raided Tony Stark's armory, took an Iron Man suit, painted it with Captain America's stars and stripes, and called himself the Iron Patriot. It was genius branding. He wasn't the Goblin anymore. He was the savior. He dismantled S.H.I.E.L.D. and created Hammer, which didn't even stand for anything. He just liked the acronym and formed his own Dark Avengers. We actually talked about this in episode 1 with the Sentry. Norman manipulated Robert Reynolds, arguably the most powerful being on the earth, by playing on his mental illness. That's the kind of evil Norman represents. He doesn't just punch you, he finds your psychological weak point and presses a thumb to it. But, like all fascists and tyrants, the cracks eventually show. The Goblin persona wasn't gone. It was just whispering to him from a reflection in the Iron Patriot helmet. It all fell apart during the Siege of Asgard, where he completely snapped on national television again, screaming at the sky while the heroes took him down. You can't keep a bad goblin down. In the last decade, his evolution has been pretty wild. First, he lost the ability to turn into a goblin, so he bonded with the Carnage symbiote. Let me repeat that. A tactical genius with zero morals bonded with a symbiote that is pure chaos. He became the Red Goblin. It was like the final boss of a Spider-Man video game. He also didn't have the weakness to fire or to sound because of the Goblin formula in his blood. It was terrifying, and it cost the life of Flash Thompson to stop him. But then we get the biggest curveball of all. A villain called the Sin Eater, who wields a magical shotgun that, cleanses souls, shot Norman. But instead of killing him, it ripped the sins right out of him. It took away the hate, the Goblin voice, the malice. It left Norman Osborn sane. He spent some time as the Gold Goblin, trying to atone for his past. But recently, things have taken a turn that I don't think anybody suspected. During the 8th Deaths of Spider-Man event, Dr. Doom, who was the Sorcerer Supreme at the time, tasked Peter with saving the world from the scions of Sidorak. Peter was given a magical suit and, 8 lives to do it in. But when Peter fell in battle, temporarily taken off the board, someone had to step up. Someone had to protect New York. And that someone was Norman Osborn. Norman didn't put on a goblin mask this time. He put on a Spider-Man one. He is currently operating as what we would call the Resolute Spider-Man, and wearing a sleek Osborn tech version of the spider suit. He's patrolling the city, saving civilians, and fighting gods. Think about the irony of that. The man who threw Gwen Stacy off a bridge, the man who defined Peter Parker's trauma for 60 years, is now swinging through the city wearing Peter's symbol. It is the ultimate subversion of the legacy. Norman isn't doing it for power. He's doing it because he feels the weight of responsibility, a weight he spent his entire life mocking Peter for carrying. He is a man haunted by his past, literally fighting to be the hero he destroyed. And honestly, it is the most uncomfortable and fascinating redemption arc in Marvel history. It's been a wild ride, from the broomstick to the Resolute Spider-Man, but looking at his history, it really makes you wonder about the nature of evil in the Marvel Universe. So I'll leave you with the question as always. With everything we know about the abusive childhood and the mental illness caused by the formula, is Norman Osborn a victim of his circumstances, or is there a core evil in him that would have come out no matter what? Do you buy his current redemption as the Resolute Spider-Man, or is it only a matter of time before the pumpkin bombs start flying again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for listening to this episode of Marvel Echoes. It's always a little darker when we step into the Osborn household, but I think it's necessary to understand what makes Spider-Man shine so bright. You need a dark shadow to contrast it. If you enjoyed the deep dive, make sure you subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. Leaving a like and a 5-star review really helped the podcast grow. And please, leave a comment for future episode ideas. And for more content, including 4 articles on Norman Osborn, a visual timeline of his evolution from the green to the red, make sure you visit the website in the links below. Till next time, true believers, make mine Marvel.